right, good evening, everybody. This is Scott Reed with Duck Sports Authority again. We are joined by Drew Davis and Lee Wardlaw. It is time to start talking about this weekend's game. We're going to do a real quick recap last week. Well, my part will be a recap. I've already done a lot of talking this week about this in articles. So I'm going to have a big takeaway from the game. And my big takeaway from the win over Illinois is depth. And this is what I'm taking about the game. I saw plays from Amari Washington. I saw plays from and this is the most important one. The play that I saw from, and we'll call him Dink because that's his nickname for the team, Riggs, Dewan Riggs. What he did when he came in is pretty impressive for a true freshman. The way he was running. This isn't an Illinois team that is getting beat up for 400 yards a game rushing or anything like that. They're a good defense. Did they play good against Oregon? Well, no. Oregon has been able to play good offense, get everybody. But for him to come in and be able to put up really good yardage, and it wasn't just that he put up good yards. I watched him run, and Drew, you can disagree with me if you think differently, but he ran a lot like a little bit of a mix of Bucky Irving and Jordan James. He's not as big and powerful as Jordan, but he just had that extra thing that made him get past the line of scrimmage. The explosiveness through the hole, his vision, his footwork. I was really impressed with what I saw there. And I think the depth right now and the way Dan Lanning is mastering the game plan for maintaining a redshirt year, you're bringing in a guy like Riggs in the eighth game of the year because you can do that now. You couldn't do that in the past. You had to play him those first four games or he counted for that year. So the way he's managing the roster right now is really impressive. And I loved what I saw from the depth in that game. I'll turn it over to you guys to kind of talk what you saw. I'll let Drew start.
Go ahead. Cool. I saw a pretty dominant game, just like you said. It's very interesting when you get into these games and you can go deep in your depth chart and you get to see the guys that are third and fourth string, so you can look towards the future. I thought it was a very dominant performance. Great job by the defense holding Altmaier to under 50% passing for completion percentage, making him turn the ball over twice. He looked real uncomfortable back there, and so they just did a great job. Illinois still did a great job running the ball, but that's because Brett Bielema teams do that. But outside of that, just one thing I would have liked to see from the offense, I would have liked to see them come out in the second half and put a drive or two in the end zone, and get those guys in quicker rather than stalling like they did, and Dylan Gabriel having an uncharacteristically weird throw for a turnover late in the third quarter. But outside of that, I think they're gearing up and they're ready for their next matchup. But I think they're doing a great job just handling the teams that are in front of them and making it look easy, I would say.
Coming in, I'd say Illinois uh, seemed like a pretty tough opponent, but it seemed like the game was over pretty early in that Oregon is putting a stamp on their number one ranking right now in their new conference, the Big Ten, and that defense continues to play physically and offense could have done a little better, but the short passing on the edge, earning those yards after catch is really a brand of Oregon this season, and can't wait to see what the Ducks do heading into the rest of the season.
Yeah, I know the one throw sailed away, and it sailed. I haven't seen him throw a ball like that all year. He's thrown some bad balls, but those weren't sails. Those were just bad decisions. This one on him. Don't know what happened there. I agree. I wish, and that's going to be something that I'll focus on here as we talk about now. Kind of move on to the Michigan game. I think the thing that we're going to have to watch is Michigan's probably not going to give up 35 points in the first half. They are a better defense than Illinois. They are a better defense than Purdue. They are a better defense than almost anybody Oregon has played this year, with the maybe exception of Ohio State. But what I'll say about that is I think on the front seven, Michigan might be better than Ohio State, not by talent necessarily, but by production. I think Josiah Stewart, Kenneth Grant, and Mason Graham are all having great seasons, and they're playing better than JT Tuimoloau was playing for Ohio State. Will Oregon be able to neutralize all three? Probably, because I don't think they're going to be able to rush 5 and 6 guys. They're going to have to put people in coverage, and they're going to have to play five, 6 people in coverage. They're not going to be able to blitz a lot. If they do, it'll get ugly really quick because Dylan Gabriel can make them pay if they try to blitz and make those plays unless they beat some blocks, which right now I don't see Oregon offensive line getting beat very often. And when they do, Dylan Gabriel still finds a way to make a play. 3 sacks since that really, or yeah, I think 3 sacks since that early ugly part of the season in the first 6 quarters. It's been a really strong offensive line, and I don't, Graham and Grant and Stewart are really good. Are they good enough to create an upset by keeping Oregon out of the end zone? I don't think so. I think you'll see Oregon. Will they score 40? Probably not. Will they score 30? I think so. I've got them in 31-17 range. Um, we'll ask you guys. We already put ours in our article today, Drew, but we'll still go over offensive and defensive player of the game. I'll let Drew start.
Yeah, so defensive player of the game, I think Derek Harmon has a chance to make some noise. Michigan runs the ball a whole lot. That's what they're going to try to do. They don't really have an offensive identity right now as far as passing the ball. So they're going to try to go at you with that two-headed monster of Mullins and Edwards. But this is the time for a guy that goes up against a good offensive line to make some plays in the backfield, get some TFLs, put some pressure on the quarterback, whether if it's Alex Orji or if it's the other guy, which I'm blanking on his name right now. But
Davis Warren.
so yeah, Davis Warren. And don't trust a guy with the last name Davis for a first name. Just don't do it. And then and then as far as offensively, and I talked about this a little bit when I wrote about it. I feel like the Oregon coaching staff has been kind of saving Jordan James and just kind of just making sure they don't overuse him or just saving him up to the end of the year. You saw Noah Whittington very early last week in the game against Illinois. And like you said, they're going against a very good Michigan defense. So I think this is the time that he gets 15 to 20, maybe even midway up to 25 carries. And when you're going against this team, it is really going to show how you match up against very good defensive teams, some that you're going to face in the playoff or the Big Ten championship. We don't play Indiana and whatever other team is at the top. So if that ends up being the matchup later, you're going to need to run the ball. You're going to need to control the clock. And so Jordan James could be a big part of that, and they want him to be healthy.
And that other team would be your cousin's team, Penn State.
Penn State.
Lee, what do you got?
Yeah, for me on defense, Mateo Ugalele setting the edge on running quarterback Alex Orji, who had success against Michigan State. I feel like you're going to see a little bit of a potentially a ground and pound football Big Ten style game. You got to think about Ann Arbor on the road. The Wolverines with a gritty win over a decent Michigan State program last week, 24-17 in a rivalry, but this Wolverines office just can't seem to produce. And you see the Ducks continuing with their physical approach on defense that really, really resonated against Ohio State, and that really felt like a Big Ten Premier League game on NBC. On offense, Jordan James, look for him to try to set the tone against a physical Michigan defense. But how about Kenyon Sadiq getting big yards for the Ducks as a tight end? Again, with that physical game in Ann Arbor type theme going on, and why doesn't he have a breakout game? So I'll go with Sadiq and continuing to put on for the Pacific Northwest region of players for the Ducks who have some underrated players from their home territory.
Yeah, I went with Jordan James also, and for the same reasons that Drew did. I just think this is a game where you need the running back to set the tone. They're going to probably try to step back a little to stop the passing game, and I think that's when you're going to see, and it's going to be a numbers thing. It's Dylan Gabriel, when he comes to the line, it's like Bo Nix last year. He's going to come to the line. He's going to see what defense they're in. He's going to do his pre-snap read. He's going to then do his RPO stuff, and he's going to see whether it's a run or a pass, and it's going to be based on the personnel. And I think it would be smart of Michigan to not allow the big plays over the top, which means they're going to probably give up some yards on the ground. And I think Jordan James has the ability to carry it 25 times. I believe he carried it 23 against Ohio State. So I know he has that capacity. And I think if the Ducks can ride him a little bit in this game, they've got Maryland next week, and then they've got a bye week. No, they've got Maryland, Wisconsin, then a bye week. So I think they're going to do that what they can this week and then kind of work around it. And if they can get some time to spell with Noah Whittington, they will. But I've got Jordan James. Defense, I went completely off list for everybody else. I went with Jeffrey Bassa. I think the only chance for Michigan to really score a lot of points, to try to get as many points as they're going to need to beat Oregon, is to use Colston Loveland over the middle. And that's going to take some good coverage by the linebackers. I know they're going to play some zone under and some man over top, and they're going to do some different things with their coverage stuff. But Jeffrey Bossa and the linebacker core is going to have to be able to make plays to stop Loveland from getting yards after the catch. Are they going to be able to stop him from catching the ball at 8 yards on a dig? Probably not. Are they going to be able to stop him from getting upfield? That is going to be the question. You do not want Jabbar Muhammad to have to try to tackle Colston Loveland 25 yards up the field, because that is a mismatch, and you don't want that. So that is who I have going defensive player of the game. Um, what do you got score prediction, Lee?
I'll go 31-17 with the Ducks. Michigan at Ann Arbor definitely has the makings of a trap game, but Oregon so deep and just not trusting Michigan on offense, and just a letdown from that national championship program.
What do you got, Drew? Although I've seen it, but we'll go anyway.
If I remember correctly, I think I put 38-16 or 17. I just think that I take Michigan's offense into consideration a lot, knowing how putrid it is. But just thinking that if they can't move the ball, their defense is going to be on the field a lot. And so I think we're going to take advantage of that. I think they can wear them down if your team is on the field for 35, 40 minutes and your time of possession is just crazy. So I think Oregon will wear them down. Michigan might get a couple field goals. I have to go for it on fourth and not get it. And so that's just going to make the gap wider with the score and just with the competition for that day.
Yeah, I went with Oregon, obviously, but I just went Vegas. Vegas has it as a 45-point over under. They have it as a 15.5-point spread. So I went 31-17, a little bit under the spread because I just never bet over the spread. I never predict over the spread. I don't want to say never. I rarely pick over the spread because I think it's really tough when it's a spread of more than 10 to really say that somebody's going to cover a 15.5-point spread on the road at the big house. I know Michigan's not what they were a year ago. I do think it'll be like, say, 31-10 in the fourth quarter, and the Michigan will get a late touchdown, so it will look a little bit more respectable, just because this team scored 7 points against Illinois, 7 against Illinois, a team that Oregon scored 35 against in the first half. And I know those properties don't work exactly that way. You can't say because Oregon did it this way, but it shows that Oregon has a considerably better offense than what Michigan has this year. Despite Davis Warren, Alex Orji splitting time last week, I think Oregon's offense is still just too good for this Michigan team to completely stop. And I do see Oregon, when they get a lead, they tend to let off the gas. And I don't know how much of that is Dan Lanning saying, I'm going to protect the roster and I'm going to pull off the gas a little bit, and how much of it is, load management, or how much of it is the guys. They sometimes, when you get a big lead, it's really tough to stay focused on one play at a time, because at that point, I don't care how often the coach tells you every play matters. When you're up 21 points with 8 minutes left in the game, yes, the play matters, but the game is won, and people make mistakes when they let up and they feel like it's over. So wow, my camera stopped. That's weird. So that's what I got. I do think Oregon wins it. I do think they win it comfortably. I'm just not sure they cover the spread. We will move on, because I do want to talk recruiting this week. I think the thing about recruiting, there's a lot of stuff going on that is exciting, even though it's only the 2025 class is almost wrapped up. I think the Jakeem Stewart stuff, it's legitimate. Oregon has a legitimate shot at this guy, and it's not just wishful thinking. It's not bad information. It's a legitimate shot at this guy, and he is a difference maker on defensive line. He is he's a bigger version of what Kayvon Thibodeau was coming out of high school. He's 270 pounds, 6'5". He moves like he's 230 pounds. He's a guy that I think is going to make a difference no matter where he ends up. Oregon is a legitimate threat there. I think the other one that really is trending, obviously, in Oregon's way, we talked about it all this week, Vanderplug. I think, there's nothing that happened this week that makes me change my thought that he's going to eventually flip from Washington to Oregon. In fact, there were some things that occurred this week. Can't say everything that I know for reasons, but there were some things that happened this week that make me actually more confident that it's going to happen. Not that it's a guarantee. It's recruiting. Things change. I don't think Lincoln Cure is going to flip. He's done everything except say, stop calling me coaches.
Hmm.
Uh, and I don't know, Andrew Olesh, I think Oregon's in there, but I also think Penn State's in there. And I think this is someone who probably stays closer to the East Coast. And I think even if he flips from Michigan, it's going to be to somebody like Penn State. I just don't know that he's going to pick Oregon. I know Oregon would love to have two. I think they're going to be sure to take the one tight end. Um, and the other things, I talked last night to Cody Cameron, and I don't know if Lee or Drew, you know who he is. He's a guy I met 5 years ago. He lives in Arizona. He covers Arizona high school recruiting, and he's my go-to guy for Arizona stuff. And a couple of the names that really stood out. The first one, 2027 guy, is Jake Hildebrand, and he's a elite offensive lineman. He is going to potentially be the top offensive tackle in the class for 2027. He's 6'7". He's 270, 280 pounds as a sophomore. The kid is elite. He's playing elite ball as a sophomore and dominating people that are bigger or older than him. I don't want to say bigger. The other two names that stood out for me, there's a couple of 2026 guys, and you'll recognize the names because their dads are famous. First one is Bastian Vandenbosch. His dad, Kyle Vandenbosch, played for several NFL teams and is living in Arizona and is coaching at the same high school as his sons. He actually has twin sons. Bastian's a linebacker and he's a little bit undersized at 6'1", and I think he's around 200 pounds, but he plays physical and he's still got some time to grow a little bit. And I think that's somebody that Oregon has offered early offer, so it's not. I don't know that it's committable yet, but it's one of those things that Oregon is really, really likes him. The other one that I heard about last night that it really is going to be an intriguing one to watch because he grew a ton between I think freshman and sophomore year. His name is Dalen Sharper. His dad is Darren Sharper. We'll talk about his dad was a successful NFL vet. We won't talk about what happened later. The Sharper grew to like 6'4", 200 pounds, and he's an athlete, so he could play on either side of the ball. And he's physical, he's strong, he's catching up to his body, and when he does, he's going to be an elite athlete. And I think that's somebody that Oregon is going to like. The reason I called Cody and had him on the show last night is Oregon has done a tremendous job in the state of Arizona for at least a decade of getting the top player in the state out of the state of Arizona. Every year, it seems like they're in contention for that guy. So he's somebody that I lean on when I want to talk about Arizona football because he goes to the games, he goes and knows the recruits. He's actually made a visit with some of the recruits last year to Oregon and got to check out the facility. So he's my guy, and he's got those three guys. Those are three guys I'm going to keep an eye on. Lee, what are you hearing on recruiting buzz?
Yeah, Saga Putele out of Hawaii, very good leader down the field, got a strong arm, looking elite Cal commit, but staying pretty tight about the Ducks, but just told me that he was looking forward to learn more about the offense and the culture Lanning is building before the visit, and just that after the visit, that he was able to meet with the quarterbacks and Lanning and see the culture that he's building and learn more about the offense. But I really had a really excellent conversation with 3-star number 4 in Washington and number 22 in the class of 2026 weak side defensive and Derek Coleman Brusa of the Seattle metro area. We had a very long conversation, had a chance to look at his film. I would say, again, reiterate the fact that he's playing a solid group of competition in the Pacific Northwest in Seattle. And it kind of like track speed off of the edge and like a rhino when he hits, creating all kinds of problems with his arms, creating pass deflections using those arms to create havoc with the quarterbacks and the running backs. Maybe a little improvement could be seen with his run defense, but very good player. I think would be a solid pickup for the Ducks, and I really like what in terms of his Oregon recruitment, like what he is saying about the Ducks. He told me, Southern Cal, Washington, and Tennessee are among other standouts, but um, we talked a lot about the Ohio State visit, and he even kind of told me about practice. He went to a pre-practice meeting and spent time at practice with Coach Dan Lanning and the Ducks, and Lanning had a really, I would say, a really inspiring speech about the 20-mile march to the North Pole, and he described how he uh, how that translates to the Ducks program culture and what they're building under Lanning, and you can see that from the outside with the program, but just that relentless attitude is something he really resonated with. He really felt um, like he was wanted during the trip. I said, what's something that stood out outside of the regular answers, the environment, the program. He said the fact that he felt prioritized by the Ducks. He had great conversations with the coaching staff, and um, really feeling good about him. And for this week, just really heard from him and Jerron. But those would be two solid pickups from the Pacific. And Coleman Bruce are really exciting what he brings to the table as a weak side defensive end.
Now, I'm going to ask Drew, what do you think has changed in the way recruiting is done today, other than the obvious NIL, right? We don't want to talk about that. That's the obvious thing that's changed. But I think, and this is a story I heard where Jonathan Vilma said when he was on the Hurricanes, when he was recruited, he heard all the stuff, the recruiting pitch, and they love you and they treat you like you're their son and they do all these things. As soon as you get on campus, it was nowhere near that. He said, when you get on campus, you are not their son. You are driven by them. And so he used to jokingly say to recruits that were on their visit, yeah, it ends in about 6 months, guys. It ends in about 6 months. And that is, I think, obviously there's a change because I don't think that kind of disparity in the way you're treated on a recruiting visit and the way you're treated once you get to campus is there anymore. But what do you think has changed over the years? Because we see a lot of this now that's just different than it used to be.
Yeah, I think it's a lot of pageantry. I think before you were going to a program and programs were like, "Hey, you're a great player. We want you to come play for us and represent our school." But now there's a lot of players that are coming up that have brands of their own. So and they have a following of their own. And so I believe with the university, with the football team, with the sports teams, everybody knows who that school is. But once you get a big name player or a 4 or 5 star guy or somebody that's well sought after, it's more so helping you build your program as well. And as recruits are looking at going to schools, they're looking at things like, what do you guys do on visits? The photo shoots. How do you guys do it? So everybody has their different model of how they do it. And I feel like that's a reflection of your school and your program and your coach and your staff that you have. Are you coming to the photo shoot? Are you coming to the games and we're having fun? And what are the training table meals like? What are the recruiting meals like? What are the pitches? All this other stuff. And so I really feel like it's like you're being courted, and it's always kind of felt like that, but more so now it's like, hey, we want you to come be a part of this and help build it up more. So I would say more so than anything, just now that recruiting is the way it is, I think the players have a little bit more control and the coaches are kissing a little bit more butt here and there, probably more than they would like to. But I also know that it's like, hey, we really want this guy, or we really want this guy to come be a part of our program. What do we need to do? We need to go, and it's going above and beyond for certain players, but I feel like it's going above and beyond for a lot of players, not just your top players you're targeting, but I feel like coaches now, they're like, okay, the 4 and 5 star guys are nice, but there's still going to be some guys that come in here and slip under the radar. So we can't miss out on them by maybe not sending them to the same photo shoot or not giving them the same amount of love that we gave somebody else. And so everything's pretty much on full display as far as like what schools do recruiting players, and players see that. So they really know like, okay, well, they did this for that player, but they skipped out on that with me. And so it's just a lot more upfront, in my opinion.
Yeah, one of the things that I've noticed over the last 2 years is the depth of connections changes how you're able to recruit and it improves how you're able to recruit. When Dan Lanning first got to Oregon, he did not have as many West Coast ties as he does now. And while he had some, because when you're at Georgia, you have ties everywhere, right? You don't have just ties within Georgia, Florida area. You know people all over the country, but it's not the same as being in Oregon and traveling to California way more than you used to. They didn't travel to California every weekend at Georgia. They went out there for a few elite players, did their thing, do their things. The connections he's got now are starting to show. And that's why the 2026 class, which is ranked number one in the nation already, it's early for the 2026 class, but it is going to be an elite class, probably the best class he's signed so far because he has different level connections. And if you looked at some of the players that Oregon's lost out on to say like Miami. Mario Cristobal was here for 4 seasons, and he had a lot of different people he had connections with, especially for offensive line. That is starting to change now with the addition of Douglas Utu for this cycle and a couple other really good offensive linemen and Cody Green already for next cycle. You're starting to see those connections pay off, and I think that's a part of it is having that relationship with those coaches because the coaches know when the high school coaches know when a college coach is full of it and they know and they're going to tell their players that guy's going to lie to you, that guy's going to do this as soon as you get there, this is the way he's going to change and this is the way he's going to treat you. It's okay if you go to that school, just know this in advance that is going to change. That recruiting pitch is not going to be the same as the playing pitch, and they know that. They know BS when they see it, and I think the depth of connections has really helped landing. And I'll talk about that more. The one thing I told this story last week about recruiting because when I was coming out of high school and I had to join the military, I was the same way. When all four branches, I had a high enough ASVAB, I could have done anything I wanted, any branch, whatever I wanted to do. But I chose the one that recruited me the hardest, and that was the Marine Corps. They came hard. They came to my house. They called me. They did everything they could do. They talked about what bonuses I could get. They asked about what career I wanted to do afterward. They were really aggressive in saying, we're going to do this to recruit you. Whereas the Army and the Air Force is just like, whatever. If you want to come, you'll join. If you don't want to join, you won't. And that's a recruiting pitch that didn't work for me. So this whole thinking that kids just need to love that it's narcissistic, I don't think that's true. I think a lot of kids need to feel that affection. You're asking them to leave home and go somewhere else to play sports. That is tough to do for some people, and you can't just feel like you're an afterthought. And so feeling the love, I've never had a problem with that. It's just the way it is. The other thing I think, 2026, 2027 is going to be really, really interesting to watch because those kids are also being influenced by what they're seeing on the field this year. And I know most of the time, nobody cares about a single result. They care about the trajectory of the program. And right now, what is the trajectory of Oregon's program? Up. It's up and up and up. And I think that's going to really change the perspectives of a lot of players that say you can succeed at Oregon. You can win a national championship at Oregon if you have the right players and they'll put you in the right position. So to me, that's a big takeaway from recruiting this week. The buzz is every week that Oregon wins another game is kind of that proof of the trajectory and what you can do at Oregon if you have the right mindset and if you buy into the team, right? Derek Harmon could be maybe more dominant at another program, but he's at Oregon. Dylan Gabriel might be able to put up more yards in another program, or Evan Stewart, or Tez Johnson, or Trayshawn Holden. Those guys could maybe be getting better stats somewhere else, but they're buying in the team mentality, and they're not tearing the team apart from within, which can happen. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen with one particular season at Oregon where it got torn apart from within based on some stuff that was happening in the locker room that didn't jive well with the teams. And that's a lot of the big takeaways I have this week on Recruiting Buzz. And those Arizona guys, I'm going to keep an eye on them. I've already kind of started contact with them. We'll just keep that going forward. But I'm looking forward to seeing what else they can pull. The Washington game is going to be a big recruiting visit weekend. Jakeem Stewart will be in town on the bye week on November 23rd for his official visit, which means it'll be even more in depth with the planning, the conversations that I had with the faculty, all the different people inside the program. So that'll be big. Keep an eye on that weekend, and then keep an eye on the Washington weekend because it's a rivalry game now. It is going to get a lot of people to it, and I know it's been one that's been circled on the calendar for everybody. You guys got any parting shots?
Scott, I read a little bit about your buzz on Vanderplug. He also agreed to an interview with me, but we haven't chatted yet. obviously committed to Washington, but that game comes to mind when I hear that name.
Gotcha. Drew, you got
And then,
anything?
yeah, man, I know you said Tez could probably be putting up better numbers in a different program, but he's stepping on the doorstep with breaking the all-time Oregon receiving record, which I didn't even really know. I think either receptions or yards or one of the two or both. So shout out to him, man. He's come in, his journey, his path, his story's been great. Small dude, but man, when he's out there on the field, he plays big. So I enjoy watching him play. And thank you guys for all the recruiting stuff, keeping me up to date on the names and what's going on. I definitely appreciate it, and I definitely appreciate both of your hard work.
You got it, my
Awesome.
friend.
I appreciate you guys. We will do this again next week.
Sounds good.
All right. Thanks, guys.
You got
Take
it,
care.
Scott.